On Suralis for life had always been calm, quiet, and full of simple routines. The colony was built in wide open plains, dotted with softly glowing lakes and tall, slender trees that shimmered with silver leaves under the pale sun. Its people were gentle, soft-spoken beings who valued peace above everything else. They were scholars, healers, artists, and builders. Fighting and war were foreign to them. From the moment they learned to walk, they were taught to solve problems with words, understanding, and careful planning rather than strength or violence. For generations, Suralis 4 had been a safe world, largely unknown to the dangerous galaxy beyond its star system. The people lived with a quiet confidence, believing that the stars were too vast and distant to bring real danger to their doorsteps. Families grew and thrived, children ran barefoot across the soft grasslands, and the elders taught them the history of the world, the stories of creation, and the lessons of cooperation. Their homes were beautiful structures of crystal-like material, which reflected the sunlight in soft rainbow patterns, and their cities were laid out with care, in harmony with the land, never harming the natural beauty of the world. But the peace of Suralis 4 was fragile. While the people lived in tranquility, a darker reality existed just beyond their skies. The region of space surrounding their system was ruled not by gentle beings, but by pirates, raiders, and slavers groups that thrived on chaos, fear, and destruction. These were not creatures of honor or rules. They only understood power and dominance. They roamed from system to system, searching for worlds that were unprotected, defenseless, or vulnerable. Suralis 4, with its lack of any military or defensive systems, became an easy target. The first few raids were small, leaving the colony shocked but unharmed. Valuable resources were stolen, some minor structures were damaged, and a few brave citizens were captured before being ransomed back. It was terrifying, but it seemed like a mistake to the colony. They believed these attacks might be isolated incidents, random acts by careless raiders. However, as months passed, the attacks grew more frequent, bolder, and more destructive. Ships appeared on the horizon, firing indiscriminately at farmlands and settlements. Families were forced to hide in their homes or underground shelters, and the once peaceful skies of Suralis 4 became a place of fear. The raiders did not just want resources, they wanted to send a message. Every attack left scars, not just on the land, but on the hearts of the people. The colony's leaders, the Council of Wise Elders, struggled to find a solution. They called emergency meetings, debated strategies, and even considered trying to train a small defense force. But no matter how hard they tried, their people simply were not made for fighting. Their strengths lay in knowledge, creativity, and understanding, not in weapons or combat. The elders sent desperate messages to neighboring star nations, hoping for assistance. Every message was carefully crafted, detailing the raids, the cruelty of the attackers, and the growing hopelessness of the colony. They offered resources, trade agreements, and alliances, anything to secure protection. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and still no one answered. Some nations claimed the problem was too far away. Others said that sending help could provoke the raiders, and many, the elders realized bitterly, simply did not care. Suralis 4 was just a small, peaceful world with no military value, hardly worth the risk to intervene. As the months without help continued, the people of Suralis 4 began to feel the crushing weight of despair. Farmers looked at their fields, knowing that raiders could burn their crops at any moment. Parents held their children close at night, whispering prayers for safety that had begun to feel meaningless. Scholars and healers, the pillars of the society, worked tirelessly to maintain some sense of normalcy. But even their efforts could not stop the creeping fear that had settled over the colony like a heavy fog. The once bright laughter of children was replaced with quiet whispers of worry. The tall silver trees, which had always seemed to stand as symbols of resilience, now cast long shadows that felt threatening under the people's fearful gaze. One particular morning, the colony awoke to signs that the raiders were preparing for an even larger assault than before. Scanners detected multiple ships entering the system, moving with precision and coordination. The colony's scientists tried to analyze the fleet, but the numbers were overwhelming. The people realized that this attack would not be a minor raid, it would be an invasion. Panic swept through the cities and settlements. Citizens ran to their homes, packed essentials, and tried to find safety. The council called an emergency, gathering in the central square, a place that had always been used for celebrations and community gatherings. The elders' faces were grave as they addressed the terrified crowd. They admitted, openly and without sugarcoating, that the colony could not hope to defend itself with its own resources. There was no army to fight, no shields to protect the cities, only the hope that someone, somewhere, would answer their desperate calls for help. It was in that moment, just as hopelessness seemed absolute, that the scanners picked up an unusual signal. A ship of a type no one had ever seen before appeared on the edge of the system. Its design was unlike anything in the colony's record. Sleek, angular, yet somehow appearing almost alive in the way it moved through space. It bore the insignia of humanity, a name that sparked both fear and curiosity. Stories of humans, the so-called Deathworlders, were whispered across the galaxy, creatures that thrived on the most hostile planets, capable of surviving situations that would kill almost any other species. They were known to be terrifying, unstoppable, and utterly unpredictable. Most star nations avoided them, and many spoke of them with awe or dread. The people of HFY 4 did not know what to make of this. The presence of a human ship could mean destruction, or it could mean salvation. Fear and hope tangled together in every heart. Parents clutched their children tighter, elders stared at the viewscreens in disbelief, and the council debated frantically. Could they trust these humans? Were they friends, or was this an advanced raider scouting the system under a different name? Time was running out, and the colony had no choice but to wait and watch as the humans approached. Even as they waited, the colony reflected on their lives, their choices, and the fragility of their world. HFY 4 had thrived for centuries in peace, and yet the very peace they cherished had made them vulnerable. They realized that intelligence, kindness, and creativity, while beautiful, were not enough to protect them from the dangers lurking beyond the stars. The arrival of the human ship, terrifying as it might be, represented a chance, perhaps the only chance, to survive the coming storm. As the human vessel entered orbit and descended slowly toward the surface, the people of HFY 4 gathered, together in small groups, holding hands, whispering prayers, and sharing silent hopes. The youngest children did not yet understand fear, while the older citizens had long accepted it as part of life. But everyone, regardless of age, felt the same mixture of anxiety and expectation. Something was about to change. Something had arrived that could tip the balance of life and death on the colony. For the first time in months, the people dared to imagine survival, not because of their own abilities, but because of the mysterious, powerful beings descending from the sky. The ship landed gently in the central plains, far larger than any building on the planet and casting a shadow that stretched across the city. Its doors opened slowly, and a human figure stepped out, tall, confident, and calm. The colonists held their breath, waiting to see whether this would bring safety or further destruction. Every eye was on the human as it surveyed the land, as if measuring not just the world, but the people themselves. For the first time in many cycles, the colony felt something they had almost forgotten: hope. Hope that they were not alone. Hope that help had finally arrived. And in that moment the elders realized that perhaps the legends were true. Perhaps the Deathworlders had come not to conquer, not to harm, but to protect. The people of HFY 4 had endured fear, pain, and abandonment, but now, facing the unknown power of humanity, they felt a spark of possibility, a chance that they might survive what was coming next. The quiet world, so fragile and gentle, held its breath as the first steps toward salvation began. Life on HFY 4 had always been peaceful, quiet, and simple. The people lived close to nature, depending on the gentle climate and rich land around them for generations. They believed their world was too small and too harmless for anyone to care about. They had no military, no defense systems, and no history of war. Their biggest problems were storms, crop failures, and the occasional wild animal wandering too close to the villages. But all of that changed when the first signs of trouble appeared. At first, but growing rapidly until they became a constant shadow hanging over everyone's lives. It began with the sky. One morning, farmers noticed strange trails cutting across the upper atmosphere. They were thin, silvery lines that glowed faintly in the sunlight, tracing patterns the colonists had never seen before. At first, they assumed it was some kind of natural phenomenon. But the patterns kept coming: more trails every day, all moving in the same direction. Children pointed at the sky and asked what they were. Elders exchanged uneasy looks but had no answers. Something was out there. Something was watching. A few days later, strange signals began interfering with the colony's communication systems. The usually clear network became filled with sharp static bursts and low humming tones, like someone or something was trying to probe the colony's technology. Messages that once transmitted instantly between villages now arrived incomplete or distorted. At first, people blamed natural interference, but the patterns grew more deliberate, more intentional. This was no storm. This was intelligence. Tension slowly crept into daily life. The peaceful routines that had defined HFY 4 for centuries were now overshadowed by a growing fear that no one wanted to name. Meetings were held in village centers, where elders tried to calm the frightened citizens, but even they were unsure. They had never prepared for anything like this. Their civilization had thrived on peace, not defense. Soon, the sky trails stopped being distant lines. Lights began appearing at night, moving in slow, deliberate paths across the darkness. Entire families stood outside their homes, watching the glowing shapes drift silently overhead. They were too high to see clearly, but too controlled to be natural. Children clung to their parents, asking if monsters lived in the sky. Adults had no comforting answer. The first real sign of danger arrived when a small scout shuttle crash-landed on the plains. It came down fast, trailing smoke, lighting the night sky with a streak of fire before slamming into the ground. A team of colonists rushed to the site, hoping to help survivors or provide aid. But when they reached the shuttle, they found no injured crew, only a smashed hull covered in markings they could not decipher. The air around the wreck smelled of chemicals and burned metal. Something had shot the shuttle down. Something powerful. Fear spread like wildfire. Rumors filled the streets. Some said an alien species was preparing to invade. Others believed pirates were scanning the colonies for resources to steal. Some even whispered that the raiders were not coming, they were already here. The Colony Council finally decided to send out an emergency message to nearby star systems, calling for help. They had no weapons, no shields, and no experience in dealing with hostile forces. All they could do was hope someone would hear their plea. The message was sent out repeatedly, broadcast across every frequency known to them, but no one answered. Days passed, and silence echoed back across the communication lines. The fear became more real when the colony's long-range sensors detected large unidentified objects moving closer in space. At first, the numbers were small, 2 or 3 objects, then 4, then 8. By the 10th day, more than 20 hostile signatures were approaching the planet. Their trajectory was clear, their formation tight. They were not passing by. They were coming straight to SERALS-4. Panic erupted across the colony. People gathered in the central plaza, shouting questions, begging for answers the council did not have. Mothers held their children close, and elders trembled at the thought of what was coming. The colony had no ships, no escape routes, and no way to defend themselves. The raiders, whoever they were, had chosen an easy target, a soft world with no protection. As tension rose, the colonists tried to prepare themselves in the only ways they could. Farmers stored food underground. Artisans boarded up windows and reinforced doors with whatever materials they could find. Engineers tried to repair communication systems, hoping desperately that their distress call would reach someone. But deep down, everyone knew it wasn't enough. They were preparing for a storm with nothing but hope. At night, the atmosphere around the planet became restless. More lights appeared in the sky, larger, brighter, and moving with a terrifying purpose. The ground occasionally trembled as shockwaves from distant atmospheric entries pulsed through the soil. The children cried in their sleep, and adults stayed awake, listening to the strange vibrations in the air. The Colony Council met once more, this time in complete silence. The elders sat around a circular table, their faces pale and drawn. They knew they had to accept the truth. The raiders would arrive within days, perhaps even hours. They had failed to protect their world. They had failed to prepare their people for the danger they had always believed would never come. Yet amid all the fear, a strange sense of unity began to grow. Families who once kept to themselves opened their doors to neighbors. Villagers worked together to set up makeshift shelters and gather supplies. People offered to watch each other's children, share food, and support those who were alone. There was a quiet courage in their actions, a determination to face whatever came with dignity and cooperation. Even in fear, their culture of kindness remained strong. As the raider fleet drew nearer, the colonists noticed new changes. The interference in communication systems intensified, turning into sharp, painful bursts of sound that forced people to cover their ears. Machinery malfunctioned. Lights flickered across the settlements. Even animals sensed the coming danger, fleeing into forests and valleys in large herds. Nature itself seemed afraid. Then, without warning, the sky filled with massive dark shapes. Enormous ships emerged from the clouds, their hulls jagged and black, like giant beasts descending from the heavens. Their engines roared, shaking the ground. People fell to their knees in terror. The raiders had arrived. The colony plunged into chaos. Some tried to run, though there was nowhere to go. Others froze in fear, staring up at the terrifying ships. A few shouted to remain calm, but their voices were drowned out by the rumbling thunder of engines. The raider ships positioned themselves above the largest settlements, casting enormous shadows that covered entire fields and villages. Their presence alone felt like a threat, a warning of what they intended to do. But just when the first raider ship began to descend, something unexpected happened. Another signal cut through the interference. It was faint, shaky, almost too weak to notice, but it was there. A voice, a human voice. And it carried a message that made the council freeze in disbelief. SERALS-4, this is Commander Elena Ward of the United Human Coalition. We received your distress signal. Hold your ground. Reinforcements inbound. The council stared at one another, stunned. Help had come. Someone had heard. Someone was coming to defend them. Outside, the colonists looked up at the sky, unsure if they had imagined the voice. But then, through the clouds, a soft glow began to appear. It grew brighter, stronger, and more focused, like a star descending from the heavens. That was a ship's, powerful, and unlike anything the colony had ever seen. Hope, small but powerful, sparked in every heart. The Deathworlders had arrived, and for the first time in months, the helpless people of SERALS-4 felt a flicker of safety. The morning of the attack dawned like any other, but the sky carried an uneasy stillness. A pale sun rose over SERALS-4, glinting off the silver-leafed trees and the glassy surfaces of the colony's buildings. Birds of soft, iridescent colors chirped nervously, sensing the tension that even the young children could feel. The colony had been on edge for weeks. But this day felt different. The raiders had not only returned, they were coming in force, far larger than anything the people had ever faced. The gentle hum of the human ship, Resolute, echoed across the plains as its crew prepared for the inevitable. Commander Alina Ward moved among her team, calm yet focused, inspecting weapons, checking energy shields, and coordinating with the few human personnel who had landed with her. Her eyes were steady, unshaken, yet in them was the weight of knowing that failure meant certain destruction for every life below. From the observation decks, the colonists watched in a mixture of awe and terror. The fleet approaching the planet was massive ships of various sizes, each bristling with weapons, scanning the surface as if measuring every settlement. Their engines left trails of fire and smoke, painting the sky in ominous streaks. The elders whispered among themselves, realizing how unprepared their people truly were. Even with the humans here, the scale of the threat was immense. There were dozens, perhaps hundreds of raider ships, while the humans on the ground numbered only a handful, supported by their single vessel. Any rational mind would have counted the odds against survival. Yet, as the humans moved, there was a sense of inevitability, as though these beings had been forged for this moment. The raiders struck first, skimming the outer atmosphere and firing warning shots at the colony's outer fields. Sparks and fire erupted in the distance as small structures were hit. The colonists screamed and ran for cover, diving into shelters, cellars, and underground tunnels. Children clung to parents, and the elders tried to guide them, but fear made coordination difficult. The humans, however, stood firm. Their movements were precise, almost mechanical, yet fluid. Shields flared and flickered under incoming fire, and energy pulses fired from carefully positioned turrets, striking the raider ships with pinpoint accuracy. Every hit was a demonstration of the human skill and resilience the colonists had only heard about in whispered legends. On the ground, Commander Alina led a small squad through the city's main avenues that humans had built temporary barricades, using the colony's crystalline materials and improvised energy fields. Their strategy was simple but effective: hold the line until reinforcements could arrive or until the enemy had been sufficiently weakened. The raiders, however, were not easily deterred. They pushed forward with brutality, firing plasma cannons and boarding vessels in waves, intent on breaking through the defenses. The humans fought with a mixture of courage and calculated precision that defied the raiders' expectations. Every fallen raider was replaced by another, yet the humans did not falter. Their training, honed on worlds far harsher than Sorali's 4, showed in every movement, every shot, every decision. Despite the human skill, the scale of the assault began to take its toll. Energy shields flickered, defensive barriers cracked, and some human personnel were injured. The colonists watched from below, their hope mixed with horror. They had never seen fighting up close. They did not know how humans could withstand such overwhelming force. Some clutched their children and prayed. Others tried to flee, but there was no escape from the battle raging above and around them. Commander Alina assessed the situation constantly, making quick decisions that balanced risk and necessity. She moved from one position to another, directing squads, redirecting energy to critical points, and sometimes personally manning weapons when needed. Her calm demeanor inspired those around her. Even when the odds seemed insurmountable, the raiders sensed the humans' fatigue and pressed harder. One massive ship descended toward the main square, firing relentlessly. The humans' barricades absorbed some of the damage, but debris rained down, scattering colonists and causing panic. Explosions shook the ground as the raider ship's weapons tore through crystalline structures, turning once beautiful buildings into rubble. The human squad retaliated, firing concentrated blasts at the ship's weak points. Sparks, smoke, and energy arcs illuminated the battlefield in a chaotic display of light and sound. The humans fought with desperation, knowing that every second counted. They had to protect the colonists no matter the personal cost. Amidst the chaos, the colonists began to notice something remarkable. The humans were not just defending, they were adapting. Each raider tactic, each unexpected maneuver, was met with a calculated counter. They moved as if the chaos was a part of them, their bodies instinctively knowing where to be, how to act, and when to strike. They worked in perfect synchronization, covering each other's weaknesses and turning the raiders' strengths against them. The colonists, who had always believed their world was defenseless, began to feel a spark of awe. Perhaps these humans truly were different, capable of surviving and fighting in ways no one had imagined. Despite the humans' bravery, the raiders' numbers were overwhelming. Commander Alina realized that conventional defense would not be enough. Casualties were mounting, and the line was beginning to crumble. She gathered her squad for a brief but crucial meeting amid the smoke and debris. Her voice was steady, commanding, but beneath it was a quiet intensity. "We hold the line. No one touches these people while we breathe," she ordered. There was no argument, no hesitation. The humans understood the gravity of the moment, and they positioned themselves for what would be the decisive phase of the battle. As the humans fought on the streets and the raiders advanced, Alina made a critical decision. The human ship had a long-range communications system, capable of sending distress signals across vast distances. She activated the beacon, knowing it was their last chance. The signal was a call for help, reaching out to every human fleet within 100 light. It was risky, revealing their location could attract more enemies, but failure to act meant certain annihilation for Sorellis. For, as the signal transmitted, that humans held their ground with renewed determination. Each shot fired, each barrier reinforced, each maneuver executed was a testament to their unwavering commitment to protect the helpless. The battle reached its most intense point as raiders finally breached one of the key barricades near the colony SS Central Plaza. Humans and raiders clashed in a violent, chaotic melee. Explosions shook the ground, and fire spread through the streets. The colonists, trapped in nearby shelters, could hear the screams, the shouts, and the energy discharges. Fear and hope battled in their hearts. They feared the humans could not hold, but they also clung to the realization that these beings were willing to risk everything for their survival. Commander Elena, seeing the breach, personally led a counterattack. With precise coordination and fearless determination, the humans pushed the raiders back, regaining some of the lost ground. But it was clear that alone they could not withstand the full force of the assault for long. As the day wore on, exhaustion began to show. Humans stumbled, shields weakened, and ammunition ran low. The colonists' fear deepened. They had come to rely on these powerful beings, yet they could not imagine the outcome if the humans fell. Yet even in exhaustion, Commander Elena never faltered. She continued to direct, to fight, to protect. Her presence was a beacon, not just to her squad, but to the entire colony. She embodied the resolve and resilience that made humans legendary. Her calm in the storm reminded everyone watching that even the most impossible odds could be challenged. The climax of this phase of battle came as the raiders launched a coordinated strike aimed directly at the central plaza. Explosions rocked the ground, sending shockwaves through streets and buildings. The human squad faced the most dangerous moment yet. Commander Elena made a final, critical decision to maintain their defense until reinforcements arrived. She would need to hold the position at all costs. Every human took their assigned position, knowing that failure meant not only their deaths but the deaths of thousands of colonists. The colonists, hidden and watching, prayed silently, hoping that this final stand would not end in tragedy. Amidst smoke, fire, and chaos, there was a strange sense of clarity. The humans, despite fatigue and overwhelming numbers, fought with purpose. Each movement was deliberate, each shot calculated. They were more than soldiers, they were protectors, guardians of the helpless. Commander Elena's voice carried over comm channels, giving direction, encouragement, and focus. The squad moved as one, intercepting attackers, repairing defenses, and shielding the colonists as best they could. In that crucible of violence, the humans' discipline, courage, and unyielding determination shone brighter than any weapon. By the end of the day, the humans had bought precious time. Though battered and exhausted, they had held the colony together, preventing a complete collapse. The raiders had caused destruction, but they had not succeeded in conquering Sorellis. For the humans' tactics, bravery, and unshakable resolve had turned the tide from total annihilation to a tenuous chance of survival. As the sun set, casting long shadows across the battlefield, the colonists began to glimpse hope, a hope that the legends were true, and that the arrival of humans, these extraordinary deaths, might be the salvation they had been waiting for. The final realization of this day was clear. The humans were extraordinary, not because they were invincible, but because they refused to give up, even when the odds were overwhelming. They had faced almost certain defeat, yet their courage, intelligence, and determination had kept the helpless alive. For the first time in weeks, the people of Sorellis dared to imagine survival, dared to believe that they might live to see another day, and dared to trust in beings from beyond their world who had arrived to protect them. The sky above Sorellis glowed with the aftermath of relentless battle. Smoke curled into the air, mingling with the pale light of the setting sun, casting the plains and shattered buildings in a golden-red haze. For hours, the colony had been trapped in chaos, with humans and raiders clashing in an endless exchange of fire, energy pulses, and strategic maneuvering. The colonists, trembling in their shelters, had watched every second, praying for a miracle, knowing that their survival depended entirely on these powerful and strange beings who had descended from the stars. Commander Elena Ward stood at the center of the human formation, surveying the battlefield with unshakable focus. Her team was exhausted, their energy reserves low, and injuries mounting. Still, she refused to surrender an inch of ground. Every life in the colony was precious, and she was determined to see each one protected. The raiders had grown bolder as the day wore on. Sensing the humans' fatigue, one massive cruiser broke away from the main fleet, moving with frightening speed toward the central plaza where the barricades had been hardest hit. The humans on the ground reacted instantly. Energy shields flared, deflecting the first salvo of plasma shots. The barricades, reinforced by the humans' clever use of the colony's crystalline structures, held just long enough to give them a chance to fire back. Elena moved with precision, directing her squad to take advantage of weak points in the cruiser's armor. Sparks flew, fires ignited, and debris scattered as the humans' relentless determination clashed with the raiders' overwhelming firepower. The colonists watched in awe. The humans were not just fighting. They were controlling the battlefield. Every movement, every shot, every defensive maneuver was part of a larger plan that the colonists could barely comprehend. What had once seemed like impossible odds, the small human squad facing a fleet of dozens, was now a battle in which the humans appeared to anticipate every move of their enemy. It was as if they had been born for this moment, forged in environments far harsher than Sorali's 4, their instincts honed for survival and defense. Commander Alina knew, however, that anticipation and skill alone would not be enough. The human ship Resolute was the colony's last safeguard. Its energy shields were strong, but even they could not withstand a prolonged attack from the entire raider fleet. She quickly made a decision that would change the outcome of the battle. The long-range distress beacon needed to be activated fully, calling for all available human reinforcements across the sector. Time was critical, and the signal had to reach the distant fleets before the raiders broke through the humans. Final line of defense. Alina activated the beacon, sending a pulse of information into deep space. It was a calculated risk. Revealing the humans' exact position could have attracted more enemies, but without assistance Sorela's 4 would fall. The colonists could only wait, holding their breath as the signal traveled faster than anything in the known system. As the humans maintained their positions, they became a shield not just for the colony, but for hope itself. Every member of Elena's team moved with tireless efficiency, protecting the civilians as best they could while fending off wave after wave of raiders. The raiders, sensing that the humans might be signaling for help, intensified their attacks. Smaller ships swarmed around the human barricades, attempting to outflank them, while larger vessels rained plasma fire from above. Explosions rocked the ground, sending clouds of dust and debris into the air. The humans adapted constantly, moving from one point to another, improvising barriers, and targeting the most dangerous threats. They communicated through gestures, short commands, and unspoken coordination that the colonists could only watch in silent awe. Despite fatigue and injury, the humans remained relentless, showing no sign of surrender. Then, just as the situation reached its most desperate point, the sky tore open. Hyperspace ruptured above the planet's horizon, and one by one sleek human warships appeared, dropping out of faster-than-light travel. 27 vessels, each armed with weapons and shields far beyond anything the raiders possessed, descended rapidly into the system. The raider ships, seeing the reinforcements, froze in confusion. Many attempted to retreat, but panic spread through their ranks like wildfire. The humans' arrival was overwhelming, sudden, and decisive. The colonists could hardly believe their eyes. What had seemed like the final moments of destruction now turned into a spectacle of salvation. The new human fleet formed a protective perimeter around Sorela's 4, and their weapons discharged in coordinated bursts that disabled or destroyed raider ships with terrifying efficiency. Plasma beams, guided missiles, and energy pulses tore through the attackers' ranks, scattering them across the system. Panic overtook the raiders. They were trained killers, but they had never faced this scale of coordinated human power. One by one, their ships were disabled, forcing the remaining raiders to surrender rather than face annihilation on the ground. Commander Alina allowed herself a brief moment of relief. Her squad had held long enough for reinforcements to arrive, and the colony was no longer in immediate danger. Injured humans and colonists were quickly assisted by medics, and makeshift triage stations were set up across the central plaza. Alina coordinated with the fleet commanders, ensuring that no raider ship could escape to regroup and attack again. That humans had turned what seemed like a hopeless situation into a decisive victory, and the people of Sorela's 4 were finally safe. In the aftermath, the colonists cautiously emerged from their shelters. They were greeted by scenes both horrifying and awe-inspiring. Craters marked where battles had raged. Smoke still rose from some of the damaged structures, but the humans moved among the ruins, assisting, repairing, and reassuring. Alina herself walked through the plaza, checking on both her team and the colonists. Her calm presence reassured the frightened people, showing that while the battle had been devastating, it had not broken the spirit of their protectors. The human fleet stayed for a short period to ensure stability. They repaired critical infrastructure, helped secure key locations, and provided medical assistance to the wounded. But more than physical support, they left something deeper with the colonists, a sense of safety, of order, and of hope. For the first time in many months, the people of Sorela's 4 felt that their lives were no longer entirely at the mercy of chaos and violence. They had been protected by beings whose skill, courage, and determination were beyond their comprehension. Commander Alina gathered the colony's council for a briefing. Her words were simple but powerful. "You asked for help. Humanity doesn't ignore that," she said. She explained that the raider threat had been neutralized, but vigilance was still necessary. That humans would remain in orbit and on the ground temporarily to train the colonists in basic defense, and to establish protective systems for the future. She emphasized that the victory had been a joint effort. The humans' intervention and the colonists' cooperation had saved the colony. The elders nodded, realizing that their world had been changed forever. the colonists began to understand the true nature of their visitors. The humans were not just warriors. They were protectors. They risked their lives for those who could not defend themselves. And they possessed a combination of intelligence, courage, and adaptability that made them uniquely suited to survive and overcome impossible odds. Their presence was a reminder that even in the face of overwhelming danger, hope and courage could prevail over the next days. The humans helped repair the most critical damage. Structures destroyed in the attacks were rebuilt using both human and colonist expertise. Energy shields and defensive systems were installed at key points across the colony to prevent future assaults. The colonists, who had never held weapons in anger, began to learn basic defensive techniques, though the humans made it clear that the primary strength of Seralis IV's future security would be alliances and strategic intelligence, rather than turning the population into a military force. By the time the human fleet prepared to depart, Seralis IV was a transformed world. It was still fragile, but it was no longer helpless. The colonists could look to the skies without fear of imminent attack, and they could trust that allies existed beyond their small world. Commander Elena addressed the council one last time before departure. You don't have to be warriors. That's why allies exist. Your strength lies in what makes you unique. Trust that, and we will always be there to help when you need us. With that, the humans departed, leaving behind systems, training, and the strongest gift of all, hope. For the first time in generations, the people of Seralis IV felt that they were not alone. They had faced annihilation, endured fear, and witnessed extraordinary courage. The arrival of the humans, the Deathworlders, had changed their lives forever. The colony had survived what should have been impossible, and from that day forward, they knew that even the most helpless could find protection, allies, and hope, if they were brave enough to reach out and trust in the unexpected. After the humans departed, Seralis IV felt different, almost alive in a way the colony had never experienced before. The silver-leafed trees swayed gently in the wind, reflecting the pale sunlight, and the lakes shimmered as if they had been cleansed by the presence of something extraordinary. The sky seemed brighter, as though the threat that had hung over the colony for months had lifted entirely. The people emerged from their shelters slowly, cautiously at first, unsure if the danger was truly gone. They looked at the rebuilt barricades, the repaired buildings, and the newly installed defensive systems, marveling at what had been accomplished in such a short time. The humans' intervention had not only saved them from annihilation, it had shown them that even the most helpless could be protected when others were willing to fight for them. The elders convened in the central plaza, a place that had once been a center for meetings and celebrations. Now scarred by battle, yet still standing thanks to the humans' careful protection. They spoke of what had happened, reflecting on the past months of fear, the arrival of the humans, and the overwhelming force of the raiders. They acknowledged the courage of Commander Elena Ward and her team, understanding that without them, Seralis IV would have been destroyed entirely. The people realized that their world had been transformed, not just physically, but spiritually and mentally. They had faced hopelessness, despair, and the fragility of their own existence, and yet they had survived because of trust, cooperation, and the unexpected intervention of outsiders who had risked everything for them. As the days passed, the colony began to rebuild in earnest. Fields that had been burned were replanted, homes that had been damaged were reconstructed, and the scars of battle slowly faded. But more importantly, the people began to rebuild their confidence, their hope, and their sense of security. The children played again in the open fields, no longer running in fear but laughing and chasing one another through the silver grass. Families gathered around restored homes, sharing meals and stories of survival, their hearts lighter than they had been in months. The colony had endured unimaginable terror, yet now there was a sense of optimism that had been absent for so long. The humans had left more than physical protection, they had left knowledge. During their stay, they had taught the colonists basic defensive strategies, the use of energy shields, emergency response protocols, and methods to maintain communication and coordination during crises. These lessons were simple but transformative. The colonists, who had never known fear on such a scale, now understood the value of preparedness, strategy, and unity. They realized that even though they were gentle and peace-loving, they could take steps to protect themselves without abandoning their principles. The humans' teachings were more than tactical, they were lessons in resilience, courage, and hope. The elders took the teachings to heart. They formed a small council of trained volunteers who could respond to emergencies, not to wage war, but to safeguard the colony in the future. They implemented communication networks, early warning systems, and defensive installations, blending human technology with the colony's natural resources. The humans had emphasized that the true strength of Seralis IV lay in its people, in their intelligence, creativity, and cooperation. Even without turning into warriors, the colony could now ensure its survival. There was a newfound sense of purpose in the community, a determination to protect one another and maintain the beauty of their world, no matter what challenges might come. Beyond practical lessons, the humans had left an impression on the hearts of the colonists. Commander Elena Ward and her team had not been distant or aloof. They had engaged with the people, listened to their concerns, and treated them with respect and kindness. The colonists had learned that strength did not always mean domination or aggression. Sometimes, true strength was in protection, empathy, and the courage to stand in the face of impossible odds for the sake of others. Children spoke of the humans with wonder, imagining the tales of bravery, resilience, and determination. Elders recounted the events to younger generations, embedding the story of survival and hope into the culture itself. The humans' intervention became not just history, but legend, a legend that would inspire the people for generations to come. The impact of the humans' visit extended beyond practical and emotional lessons. Solaris 4 had long been isolated, a quiet world unknown to most of the galaxy. But now, it had allies. The humans had demonstrated that they could be trusted, that they would respond when needed, and that even the smallest, most vulnerable colonies could be protected. The people of Solaris 4 realized that they were no longer alone in the vast, dangerous galaxy. There were beings beyond their understanding, willing to act decisively to ensure that innocence and helplessness were not destroyed by cruelty and violence. That knowledge alone brought comfort, a sense of security that the colony had never known. In the following months, the colony's culture began to shift subtly. While they remained peace-loving, scholars and leaders now included defensive planning as part of their daily discussions. Artisans and builders incorporated protective structures into their designs, blending beauty with utility. Even the youngest children were taught basic safety procedures alongside their studies in history, science, and art. Fear had not vanished entirely, but it had been replaced with awareness, preparedness, and confidence. The people no longer felt powerless. They had seen the impact of courage, coordination, and selfless action, and they understood that they could survive even in the most dangerous circumstances if they worked together and sought help when needed. The memory of the battle, of the humans' arrival, and of the terrifying raider fleet remained vivid in everyone's minds. Some nights colonists would walk to the edge of the plains, gazing at the stars where the humans had appeared, and imagine the vastness of the galaxy beyond their home. They thought of the courage it must have taken for the humans to respond, to leave their own worlds, to arrive on a planet they had never known, and to place themselves in danger for the sake of strangers. That realization deepened the colonists' understanding of bravery and altruism, teaching them that true heroism was not measured by dominance or conquest, but by the willingness to act for the greater good, even at personal risk. As the years passed, the story of that day, the day the humans arrived, became central to the colony's identity. Festivals and commemorations were held to honor survival, courage, and hope. Children reenacted scenes of the humans' bravery in plays, while storytellers described the precision, determination, and selflessness that had defined the battle. Even those who had been too young to witness the events firsthand learned the lessons, passing them down to their children. Solaris 4 had transformed from a world defined by vulnerability into a world defined by resilience, unity, and the knowledge that even the most helpless could find protection if they dared to trust in the unexpected. The elders reflected often on what had been lost and what had been gained. They mourned the damage to the land, the structures, and the brief moments of fear that had scarred the colony. But they also recognized the profound gift that had been left behind: knowledge, hope, and allies beyond their understanding. The humans had not only saved lives, they had saved a culture, preserved a way of life, and instilled a confidence that could withstand future trials. Solaris 4 would never again see itself as powerless, and its people had learned that cooperation, courage, and the willingness to accept help could transform even the most desperate situation into an opportunity for survival and growth. In quiet moments, colonists would speak of Commander Elena Ward and her team not as distant heroes but as friends, protectors, and teachers. They remembered the calm determination in her eyes, the courage in every movement, and the unshakable commitment to the colony's safety. They remembered the energy shields, the tactical maneuvers, and the final arrival of the human fleet that had turned the battle from near certain defeat into a decisive victory. But most of all, they remembered the feeling of hope, the knowledge that they were no longer alone, that help could arrive even in the darkest hour, and that survival was possible when courage met opportunity. Even generations later, the lessons endured. Solaris 4 thrived, expanding its fields, building new homes, and growing its knowledge and culture. Alliances were formed with other colonies and star nations, informed by the experience of vulnerability and salvation. The story of the humans' arrival became a symbol of what could be achieved when bravery, intelligence, and selflessness were applied to the protection of the innocent. The people of Solaris 4 understood that their lives had been forever changed, not just by survival, but by the realization that even the weakest could find strength through the courage of others. And as the sun set over the silver plains, casting long golden reflections across the lakes and trees, the colonists looked up at the stars with gratitude. They knew that somewhere in the vast galaxy, the humans' Deathworlders were watching, ready to act should danger ever return. They had learned a profound truth: in the universe, the helpless were not always powerless, the innocent were not always doomed, and hope, once given, could become the most enduring force of all.